Nikhilji, do you have any other fun things for the weekend?
Well, this is one fun thing. I mean, I attended the first session. This is the second one. A lot of learning, and obviously, it's also very motivating. To hear speakers like who were in the previous panel and now in this panel. Always
Yeah,
great to know various perspective, some interesting information. You know,
definitely.
yeah, and it's a packed weekend, four back-to-back sessions. In 2 days. So,
Yeah.
and we're covering a lot of ground. So that's exciting to me for this weekend. Uh,
Well, I'm glad.
uh, And
Okay.
just for the speakers, there's a lot of work which goes to the back end. There's a huge team which is right now supporting us. You only see two of us, but there's a big team out who is doing a lot of work. So shout out to them also, actually. And the picture you see right now on your screen, that's from Houston chapter, the youth program. I think it is from maybe last year. Yeah, it has to be from last year. Yeah.
Okay.
They go through a summer program of internship and work anywhere between 75 to 150 hours during the 3 months period, and at the end of the session, we give them a certificate.
Okay. Well, we are officially at 1:30 p.m. Eastern
Yes.
Standard Time, so I'll go ahead. Namaste, everyone. A very warm welcome to our second conversation for the day and the second conversation of Sewa Forum 2026. For those of you who were with us in the morning, you realize that we spoke about Seva, which usually starts with a simple moment about someone choosing to serve, anyone in need. Now, someone notices a need, and instead of walking past it, they're choosing to stay. But for this particular conversation, we want to begin with another small moment. Someone notices a potential in a young person before that young person has had the chance to prove it. And this could be a teacher recommending an internship, a mentor making an introduction, an employer who decides to give that first job to someone who doesn't have years of work experience, a community organization that probably helps a young person see the possibility before they even knew it existed. So I think sometimes a pathway begins with something as small as someone saying, you should try this or do it. Because potential by itself is only the first step. A young person who can be curious, capable, ambitious, and willing to work and still remain far from opportunities are quite a few today. And they may not know someone in the profession they may want to enter, or they may not live somewhere without a reliable broadband, or they may not be able to afford an unpaid internship, and they may have left school and they're finding their way back into something more complicated, or they simply might never have been given the first experience that allows them to imagine themselves in a particular future. So, one of the reasons we are having this conversation at the Seva Forum, if you see our themes, are also because we believe that at the end of the day, every young person definitely requires a chance. And in this day and age where AI is reshaping jobs and the skills attached to them, and when employers are reconsidering degrees and credentials, and when digital fluency is increasingly a requirement across occupations, while at the same time, we continue to hear something almost paradoxical, which says that employers say they cannot find the right talent they need, while many young people are struggling to find a genuine way into the workforce. So we understand that the question is not simple, because young people do have immense potential. The question is whether we have built enough pathways through which that potential can travel and navigate. And that is the question behind our second conversation, which is from potential to pathways, youth empowerment, job readiness, and digital opportunity. And you see the two core themes are listed on the screen right now. So we want to make sure that we look at the space between education and employment and at the institutions that occupy that space. And we want to make sure that we speak about how can we create meaningful first experiences, and how can we reconnect young people for whom the conventional education to career pathway has already broken down, and how do we ensure that digital opportunity expands access rather than creating another line of exclusion. And we also want to make sure that we understand how to build pathways around the realities of the lives of young people rather than asking them to navigate a fragmented system on their own. So, for those joining us today for the Seva Forum for the first time, this is a part of a 2 day conversation where we are bringing together leaders and practitioners across nonprofit leadership, education, workforce development, healthcare, technology, policy, and community service. So, our purpose is to bring forth the challenge and also to learn from all our esteemed panelists and people that are coming together, to learn from them from different parts of the system and ask them what stronger connections between those parts might make solutions possible. And finally, I am Kusuma. I'm the Associate Director of Policy Research and Thought Leadership at Sewa, and it's my pleasure to moderate this conversation. And before I turn to our panel, I would like to invite someone who has seen this question in youth development from within Seva's own work. Nikhil Jain ji is the Vice President of Marketing and Fund Development at Seva International USA, and he has spent more than 2.5 decades in community service. His work with Seva has always been deeply rooted at the community level. In Houston, where he served in the chapter leadership, he has been closely involved with initiatives bringing young people, parents, volunteers, and community leaders together, including Seva's LEAD program. And this is particularly relevant today because LEAD program is one of our youth programs, which reflects an idea at its heart that young people develop not just through instruction, but through responsibility, membership, mentorship, exposure, and the opportunity to actually do something with what they're learning. And Mr. Nickel has led and organized complex community programs and service initiatives over the years, for which in 2021 he was recognized with Seva's Akhil Chopra Service Award. So today he will give us a closer look at how Seva approaches programs in general, and talk about some of our programs like Lead and Aspire, and how they move young people from participation towards leadership. Nikhilji, thank you so much for joining us today. A very warm welcome to you, and I invite you to share Seva's work with us, sir.
Thank you, Kusumaji. Appreciate your kind introduction, and Texas size welcome to the four panelists, and also Texas size welcome to all the participants on this platform, as well as those who have joined online on YouTube. It's my privilege to introduce Seva International USA, which is a volunteer-driven humanitarian organization rooted in the timeless ethos of Seva, the word itself, which means selfless service. Seva USA was founded in 2003, and it's a part of a global movement that began in India in 1989. And today it spans in 30 countries, as you can see on the map. In the USA alone, we have grown to 46 chapters, powered by more than 11,000 volunteers, impacting almost 900,000 lives through strong community partnership. And at Seva, our work is deeply community centered. And I would just briefly highlight some of our flagship initiatives. The LEAD program, which Kusumaji talked about, LEAD actually it's an acronym which stands for Leadership, Education, and Development. So it works with high school students to build leadership, service, and real world skills. What makes this program meaningful is that it is designed as a journey. The students progress from ready to lead, then to design to lead, and then eventually to Seva leadership. This year alone, and you might be surprised, that we have more than 1,500 lead participants across all these three levels, and with that, also about 200 parent mentors, who are working together. So through grassroots volunteering, online learning, mentorship, service activities, and leadership opportunities, young people are encouraged not only to learn, but to take initiative, volunteer along with others, and also serve their own communities. And we also have an Aspire program where we support underprivileged and underserved children with after school academic support, helping create stronger foundations for their educational journey. Together, these initiatives reflect our belief that youth empowerment is not simply about preparing young people for their first job, but it's giving them mentorship, skills, confidence, real world exposures, and opportunities to lead. And that is why perhaps today's conversation on from potential to pathways, youth empowerment, job readiness, and digital opportunity, it is so important. And I sincerely thank again to all our distinguished panelists, the Seva's policy research and thought leadership team, and our volunteers for bringing this conversation together. And we all look forward to a meaningful discussion on how we can create stronger pathways for our young people from potential to participation and from participation to leadership. Thank you. And over to you, Kusumaji.
Thank you, Nikhilji, for starting us off. And thank you for sharing about Seva's impact and the flagship projects. With that in mind, now we are pleased to have with us a panel of leaders spanning different sectors and experiences and perspectives on youth development, education, workforce readiness, community-driven pathways. First, I'm delighted to welcome Evan Feynman, who is the principal of the Feynman Strategic Network. Even brings a perspective that is quite different from the traditional youth development lens. He was the founding director of the Federal Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, or BEAD, overseeing the architecture of a $42.5 billion national broadband investment across all 56 states and territories. And before that, he led broadband strategy in Virginia and held senior roles in state government and economic development. Evan's voice is really critical to us, because to this particular conversation, because today opportunity increasingly has an infrastructure layer, and a student cannot fully participate in digital education, develop certain skills, search for work, complete an online credential, or increasingly even apply for a job without reliable connectivity. So Evan brings us that particular perspective of someone who has worked at an enormous scale on one of the most basic conditions of today, which is digital opportunity itself. Evan, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Next, I am very pleased to welcome Mamadou, who is the Senior Director in Solutions Design and Delivery at Jobs for the Future. Mamadou's work lives precisely in that difficult space where a young person is and where the traditional system assumes they should already be. And he works with those communities across the country to design and scale something like back on track pathways for young adults who may have left school without a credential, or who may have completed one but still cannot access employment that offers genuine economic advancement. His work spans career connected learning, youth leadership, coaching, and technical assistance, and pathways into information technology. He has significantly contributed to the efforts where you could connect learners to industry credentials and technology careers. So this is particularly important to us because his work has an underlying premise of the fact that a pathway does not cease to be possible simply because someone's first pathway did not work. Mamadou brings us the experience of how systems can reconnect young adults rather than writing them off. Mamadou, welcome and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Next, we are also honored to be joined by Monique Miles, who is the Vice President of the Aspen Institute, Director of the Opportunity Youth Forum, and Managing Director of the Aspen Institute Forum for Community Solutions. Monique leads one of the country's most significant networks focused on young people who are disconnected from school and work. The Opportunity Youth Forum, OYF, now it actually brings, I think, over 40 local collaboratives across urban, rural, and indigenous communities, which are working not towards just placing students or people into programs, but also to change the systems around education and employment. The long term goal is an extraordinarily ambitious one, and we would love to see how it goes and also be a part of it, which is to reduce youth disconnection by half across OYF communities. And Monique's perspective has been built from both ends of that work. She began her career working directly with young people in Boston and today works at the level of national networks and systems change. That journey gives her an unusually valuable vantage point on the question that we will return to throughout this conversation. It's about, are we designing pathways for young people or are we designing them with young people? So, for that, Monique, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
It is an honor to be here. Thank you to you and the entire team at Sewa.
Thank you. And finally, I am delighted to welcome Alfonso Amos, Executive Director of Urban Alliance Detroit. Alfonso's work brings us directly into the moment when preparation meets the workplace. Urban Alliance Detroit works with more than 200 high school juniors and seniors each year, connecting them with paid internships, job skills training, mentoring, pre apprenticeships, and college and career planning through partnerships with employers across Detroit. Alfonso himself has worked across education, nonprofits, government, and the private sector. Before the Urban Alliance, he developed pathways into the innovation economy through HBCUs and led the Michigan launch of Streetwise Partners, whose work focused heavily on the essential skills that allow people to succeed once they enter the workplace. He has also served in the elected office on the Port Huron City Council and has remained engaged in youth and civic leadership. So, Alfonso brings us this important perspective of understanding what actually happens when a young person gets through that door once they find an opportunity, and what makes that first workplace experience developmental rather than merely transactional, and what do employers need to understand about their role in building the next generation of talent. Alfonso, welcome, and we're very happy to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, with no further ado, we'll start with the panel discussion. And for the first question, I would go to Monique. Monique, your work at the Aspen Institute's OYF, the Opportunity Youth Forum, has focused on expanding opportunities for young people who are disconnected from employment and education. What do you see are, I think, some of the biggest barriers that keep young people from reconnecting to education or work?
Yeah, thank you for this question and the opportunity to really set the foundation, because at the Opportunity Youth Forum at the Aspen Institute, we couldn't agree more that this question and the answer to this question are foundational to how we get to better outcomes for young people. So to begin, what I would say in terms of youth disconnection in the United States, the first most critical barrier that young people across the United States face that are out of school and out of work is institutional. And it is this idea that the systems meant to connect young people are not only fragmented and disconnected, they are inaccessible. And frankly, even in places where they may be tangentially connected, they don't work effectively for young people who need a second chance or a second opportunity to meaningful reconnection. With the Aspen Opportunity Youth Forum, we focus on 5 systems to reconnect young people to education and careers. Those systems are the K through 12 system, the post-secondary system, the career system, and then also the juvenile justice system and the foster care system. And what we found over the years of doing this work is that for young people seeking a second chance to meaningfully reconnect to education and/or careers, what they need is not only for the systems to have pathways that connect so that young people can have meaningful, transformative experiences related to both learning and work at the same time, but young people also need the scaffolding and additional supports that help them successfully navigate those pathways. So when I talk about the scaffolding and supports to meaningfully navigate pathways, what I really mean is that young people need wraparound supports. So in addition to pathways that work for young people, other barriers they face include housing, food, transportation. For young people, youth and young adults who are parents, they sometimes have barriers to accessing quality childcare. There's also barriers to healthcare, technology, and of course, income. And then the final sort of third piece of infrastructural barriers that young people face include everything here in the United States from racism. There's a history of historically racist policies that have locked young people, particularly young people of color, Black, Indigenous, and Latinx young people, out of opportunity. And at the same time, there are challenges to power and to narratives that continue to create barriers to opportunity and meaningful reconnection. And as part of that, what young people need is not only trusted adults, mentors, and allies, but they also need social networks and social capital, including professional networks that help them to experience belonging, that help them to do meaning making, that affirms their racial identity, that affirms their sense of belonging, that affirms their culture, and at the same time helps them to meaningfully connect to their purpose. So here in the United States, what I would say is first and foremost, the systems are disconnected and fragmented. After that, young people need additional supports in order to meaningfully connect to education and careers. And then finally, young people need social networks and the kinds of experiences that affirm their identity and help them to navigate pathways. In the United States, we estimate that approximately 4 million youth and young adults between the ages of 16 to 24 are out of school and out of work. So when we talk about reconnecting, what we really need are pathways that scale to meet that 4 million number, and pathways that scale to meet that 4 million number with the scaffolding and additional supports that affirm young people, prepare them in ways that are meaningful to young people, help them connect with their purpose, and put them on a path to meaningful opportunity. Thank you.
No, thank you for starting us off on a very strong note. And to move on to the next person, Mamadou, like your work at the JFF has focused on helping young people transition from education into careers. So, in this particular landscape, how do you see community organizations, even like Sewa, help young people navigate the gap between education and the workforce?
Great. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, and I really appreciate being here with this illustrious panel to engage and learn and share. So I would say at a high level that community organizations really play a central role in helping young people transition from education to careers. And we talk about community organizations as the front door, right? And by that we mean that they tend to be in the communities where young people live. They are trusted for the most part by young people. They have a supportive culture where everyone is accepted and everyone belongs. And I think that those are the sort of critical assets that community organizations can use to help young people navigate the gap between education and the workforce. Now, specifically, what can they do, and what have we learned about what makes these community organizations effective? I think I would say that there are several activities, right? So, and I would start with what I think is the most important one, which is sort of serve as a coordinator, right, in a local ecosystem. And when I talk about ecosystem, I'm talking about the fact that community organizations are not, alone. They don't operate in a vacuum. For the most part, young people live in communities where there are schools, right, where there are employers, where there are churches, where there are social services, et cetera, et cetera. Now, that's the ecosystem in which they live. And I think that community organizations need to be part of that ecosystem. And I think why? Because the work that they're trying to do, honestly, they can't alone, right? They'd have to sort of leverage other assets in the community to be able to do that work effectively. And then, so being part of that ecosystem is really, again, leveraging assets that others provide, but also helping, create an agenda, right, for just them, for not just themselves, but with others about reconnecting young people through the ecosystem. Beyond that, more specifically, I think community organizations can act as trusted navigators and ecosystems connectors, right? And then key strategies that we've seen really effective from community organizations is that they provide individualized career navigation. They help young people identify their interest, their strength, their career goals, and help them develop plans and to really put these into action. They offer meaningful work-based learning, in terms of, paid internships, job shadowing, apprenticeship, and other opportunities for young people to gain real workplace experience. They address practical barriers through wraparound supports, right? They help young people address challenges that if they're not addressed, young people will not be able to focus on education, including transportation, childcare, housing, mental health, financial stability, access to technology, right? They build really strong employer partnerships. They bring employers up to the conversation to align the trainings that they're doing with the demand, the local labor market demand, right? And work with employers to improve hiring practices and provide mentoring and advancement opportunities. They use what we call warm handoffs, right? Meaning that they establish clear referral processes. They share case management. They advocate for young people so that, for example, when young people go to the workplace, that they have the supports needed there to be able to connect, to feel like this is not that they're not isolated in the workplace. And I think another important part is also that they center young people's lived experiences, right? Young people are at the center. So you can't really design something without getting them involved from the get-go. So young people, for the most part, in community organizations, they participate, they lead in policy discussions, in program design discussions, in evaluations, and they compensate young people for those activities, right? As a way to recognize their expertise whenever possible. So I think that those are kind of a summary of the key strategies that we've seen work that community organizations have played in connecting, in sort of navigating, helping young people navigate the gap between education and the workforce.
No, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And yeah, I have a lot of questions, but I'll move on to Alfonso. Urban Alliance, we understand, helps young people gain those workplace experience through internships, mentorship, and employer partnerships. And Mamoru was also mentioning that they like young people need different support systems when they enter the workplace. So you've emphasized the importance of essential skills alongside technical skills as well. So which skills do you believe young people need the most to develop? Like which skills do they need to develop before entering today's workforce?
Thank you again, Kusama, for having me. And I love this question because when we talk about preparing young people for the workforce, I think we often make the mistake of focusing on technical side of things, right? And we ask, can they use software? Do they have this credential? Do they know how to do this particular task? And don't get me wrong, those things matter, but employers also want to know, can you communicate? Can you work with other people? Can you think through a challenge and can you take feedback? And can you show up consistently and follow through? Those are the skills that help somebody not only get a job, but keep the job and grow in it. And many,
You're on mute.
oh, I went mute. Sorry. Not sure when I went on mute, but hopefully
Yes, for 5 seconds.
when we talk about these skills that help somebody not only get a job, but keep a job and grow in it, many people call them soft skills, but we intentionally call them essential skills because there's nothing soft about learning how to navigate a workplace you've never been in before. There's nothing soft about walking into a meeting where you might be the youngest person in the room and finding the confidence to speak. There's nothing soft about learning how to advocate for yourself, manage conflict, or communicate when life is happening outside of work. And the workforce data supports that, right? The National Association of Colleges and Employers found that communication, teamwork, and problem solving continue to be among the skills employers are looking for. Its 2026 research also found that 70% of those surveyed employers are using skills-based hiring practices. That matters because it tells us that employers are increasingly paying attention to whether somebody can demonstrate their abilities, not just their credential or their degree as it appears on their resume. In that Urban Alliance, we work with young people on everything from professional communication, time management, to teamwork, problem solving, understanding workplace expectations, how to advocate for yourself. And so sometimes that means teaching somebody how to send a professional email. Sometimes it means helping a student understand that if they're running late, they need to communicate with their supervisor before their shift starts. And sometimes it's coaching them through how to receive feedback without feeling like they're being attacked. Sometimes it's helping them realize they already have more skills than they think. Because when you look at a young person who helps care for their younger siblings, balance school and work, or figure out how to get across their city using public transportation, we're already looking at someone who knows something about responsibility, adaptability, and problem solving. And they just may not know how to use that language. They may not know how to put it on their resume, but that's a skill that they already have. And so a lot of our young people already possess these skills. And so part of our responsibility is helping young people recognize those strengths and translate them into the workplace. I would also add digital literacy as another skill that young people need to have because today almost every industry requires some level of comfort with technology. And I'm not talking about whether somebody can post on Instagram or figure out TikTok. I think a lot of our young people have that part covered. I'm talking about whether they know how to use an email professionally. Can they participate in a virtual meeting? Do they know how to use a work shared document? Do they know the importance of protected information in the workplace and understanding how emerging technologies like artificial intelligence can support their work? But I also think we need to be careful not to assume all young people automatically are fluent in workplace technology. I think that is an assumption because they're young, they grew up with these phones in their hands, that they know how to use these things. Because being comfortable online and being prepared to operate in a professional digital environment are not the same thing. And so ultimately, what young people need to me is a combination of technical skills, the essential skills, and opportunities to practice both. So that's where paid internships and mentorships make such a difference. We can talk about communication in the classroom, but it becomes real when a young person has to introduce themselves to a supervisor or contribute to a team meeting or work through an unexpected challenge on the job. That's how confidence gets built. And I think it's bigger than this point here. And young people do not need us to assume they're unprepared for everything. They need us to create environments where they can learn, practice, and grow.
Oh, that's amazing. And you've reminded me of my first job when, my manager was helping me write, like, this is how you write an email, have best regards at the end and things like that. It was not taught at school, at least. It was different. So moving on to even your work has focused on expanding broadband access and digital connectivity across underserved communities. What role do you see digital access play in shaping education, based on what Alfonso has already mentioned, I guess, and skills development, and employment opportunities for young people? Where do you see broadband access and digital connectivity play a role, especially for underserved communities?
Well, thank you for that. And first, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here talking with this distinguished panel. And I want to first echo everything that my co-panelists have said, right? Like there is no one silver bullet. If we lived in the dream world where I got the perfect digital connectivity universe for all of our youth that I wanted, there would still be other issues related to housing, transportation, availability of internships, et cetera, right? Like all of those problems have to be solved. But I was especially pleased to hear Alfonso talk about, some of those challenges related to digital connectivity. And, for young people today, whether you're talking about access to education or access to their career, increasingly and essentially they begin online. If you're talking about completing schoolwork, looking for jobs, applying to colleges or training programs, you have to have reliable technology. And, often people describe that as just does this young person have that reliable, affordable, high-speed internet connection at their home? But the digital divide is really a lot more complicated than that. It, yes, includes whether reliable broadband connectivity is available where they live, but it also includes whether the family can afford to keep it connected every month, whether that young person has an appropriate device, not just a phone, right? They got to have the laptop, they got to know how to use it, and whether they've got the skills and confidence and trusted support to use that technology effectively. Those barriers affect nearly every stage of young people's education and careers. And without reliable access, it's harder to do schoolwork, harder to communicate with teachers, harder to research your post-secondary education, apply for financial aid, get your credentials, prepare a resume, search for a job, all engage in these kinds of learning activities. All of these are really critical and they're a part of almost every profession. Like as Alfonso said, like you really have to know how to do this stuff, and the impacts of this digital divide are not evenly distributed, as so many of these negative impacts are. Right, so like a young person from a well-resourced family may have a bunch of devices, is almost certainly going to have reliable connectivity every month. They're going to have parents who understand these systems that they need to engage with. And both parents and other adults who can help them navigate their career choices. And a young person without those advantages is going to be trying to do the same things, right? They're going to be trying to look at these opportunities. They're going to be trying to apply for jobs, but they're going to have a much harder time doing it. They're going to be trying to complete that same application on their phone. They may be using public Wi-Fi. There's not going to be that same trusted adult necessarily who's going to be over their shoulder, either because they're not around or because they're at work or because who knows what. And all of those challenges just get deeper and harder for those kids that don't have the same access to resources. Technology can be a leveler when we do a good job making it available broadly, but it can be something that accentuates divides and inequity when, as we have currently in this country, that availability of connectivity, devices, and skills is unevenly distributed across our populations. Worse, we have the resources to address a ton of these problems. Congress created BEAD, Broadband Equity, Access, and Deployment, the program that I ran, to make sure that every American community has access to high-speed, reliable, affordable internet connectivity. And after the states developed their plans to build these physical networks, there was also an opportunity to use it turns out, roughly $22 billion that's billion with a B, that remained for what are called non-deployment activities, which in plain language just means using the money for everything needed to make the infrastructure genuinely useful. Affordability, computers and other devices, digital skills training, cybersecurity education, tech support, and workforce development. But that money is currently being withheld from the states and has been withheld for years now, while the federal government delays issuing the rules about how it can be used and continues to call those funds savings, which worries me and other advocates that they're not actually going to be deployed to support addressing these exact barriers that we've been talking about today. Connectivity is critically necessary, it's indispensable, but it's not the final outcome. We got to install infrastructure, we got to distribute devices, we got to give young people greater agency. They got to have the ability to learn, explore possibilities, develop these relevant skills, and ultimately connect those skills to meaningful work. And, I'm optimistic that we're going to be able to solve a lot of those problems, but we can't do it if we can't all come together around acknowledging the existence of the problems and then using the resources we have available today to tackle those problems in a meaningful way.
No, that's great. Thank you. And yes, technology can be a great equalizer, but then for that to be an equalizer, there are several other things that have to come into picture and be solved at the same time. So again, I think going on to the next question, talking about like from potential to pathways. Monique, we know that not every young person might have the same access to mentors, which people might not think is as important when you start a career, but then it becomes, especially like you understand the value of it as you keep going through it. So how can communities make these mentorship opportunities or career opportunities more accessible to all young people?
Thank you. Thank you for this question. And I'll start by trying my best to weave different elements of what panelists have shared already and to offer a very gentle and friendly reframe of the question, because I think that a shift from how do we give every young person a mentor to how do we democratize access to the networks, relationships, and opportunities that mentors provide young people is a more holistic frame that really reflects what's necessary for young people to not only meaningfully connect with mentors, but also the relationships and opportunities that help them get on a path to social and economic well-being. And so I would say across the Opportunity Forum and Fund, what we see is that communities make opportunities more accessible by moving from an opt-in model where young people have to already know where opportunities exist to a more embedded opportunity model where mentorship, career exposure, paid work experiences. We can't emphasize enough that young people need to be paid for their time, paid for their learning, paid for their expertise. And also professional networks are built into the places where young people already live, where young people are already learning, where young people are already working, and where young people come together. And so what that means, what we see the most effective communities doing is first and foremost, they create universal access points. Sometimes we refer to this as multiple pathways. It gets sort of framed different ways, but the idea is that there are many different ways that young people have access points. So through education pathways, libraries, community-based organizations, youth serving programs, workforce programs, and employers all become gateways to mentors and to career opportunities for young people. The second thing that we see communities do effectively is building networks, not just one-on-one mentorship, because the truth is that there are many different ways for young people to have access to the knowledge and capital that mentorship can open. So a young person shouldn't have to find the right person per se. Communities can create networks of mentors. That includes very effective near-peer mentors, young people who have come from the same place, share the same identity, share the same experience as young people as part of that mentorship opportunity. Employers become not only mentors, but also sponsors that can connect young people to opportunity. For young people who have graduated from programs, alumni from those programs or from other professional pathways also can become mentors or near peer mentors. The third thing that we see communities do effectively, again, I can't emphasize this enough, is to pay young people to explore careers. We know it matters. Young people need to build skills, internships, apprenticeships, fellowships, project-based learning and experiences all should be paid so that the economic circumstances don't determine who can afford career exploration, who can afford mentorship, who has access to meaningful learning that opens up opportunity for a young person. The other thing that we see communities do quite well across our network is make social capital intentional. And what do I mean? I mean that employers and institutions create structured introductions, job shadowing, networking events, informational interviews, and sponsorship opportunities for young people who don't already have professional connections. Another thing that we see communities do very effectively across our network is bring opportunities again to where young people are. So rather than requiring young people to navigate complicated systems, fragmented systems, and disconnected systems, what we see communities do quite well across our network is to take opportunities into the neighborhoods and trusted community spaces where young people already gather, where young people are already organized. And then this is a core value of how we think about and approach our work at Aspen is center not just youth leadership and youth voice, but youth agency. And this is really important to clarify. We don't give young people agency. Young people have agency. The responsibility of adults is to create the conditions for young people to express their agency. I can't say it enough. We are not giving young people agency, especially young people of color. I think even that framing is not only deeply problematic, it reproduces the barriers that young people of color have to navigate when we use language of giving young people agency. Young people have agency. The job we have as adults is to create the conditions for young people to express their agency. And so what does that mean and what does that look like in our work? What that means is that young people should be supported to co-design the systems, the programs, and the pathways that determine what kind of relationships, what kind of opportunities, and what kind of supports are most useful and meaningful to them. When adults are designing without young people in the room, we miss the most fundamental things that young people need, like what does the transportation system look like? Because adults have cars, young people don't. So I say that to say having young people at the center of problem identification and solution design is critical if we are talking about mentorship opportunities and connections that are meaningful and transformative. And then the final thing that I would say we see communities do quite well is measure access and progress, not just participation. Participation is necessary, but not sufficient. What we see communities do quite well is communities ask this question of who is getting access and why, so that as they are thinking about what young people need, they are able to really design it so that the floor of supporting young people to connect with mentors is that connection. It is that access, but also what we see is that how that relationship translates into meaningful opportunity and career progress for young people. And here's the final point that I feel is really critical to make as I wrap up my point, that for Opportunity Youth in particular, the argument is that social capital, mentorship opportunities is infrastructure. Full stop. See, some young people inherit access to opportunity through their families, through their schools, through their neighborhoods, through their professional networks, and through their extracurricular experiences and activities. We know this, there's something like I think 200,000, or excuse me, yeah, 200,000 word gap by the age 3, depending on the socioeconomic status of a family a young person is born into. So what does that mean? It means that it's incumbent upon us, if we have taken up this charge to meaningfully connect young people to opportunities in this country, then it means that we have to be very, very intentional about building social capital as infrastructure so that young people who do not inherit the relationships that translate into talent and opportunity are able to meaningfully access that through the pathways we shape as adults. And so what that really means is that the question, at least in our work, is what if communities treated access to relationships, networks, and opportunity as a universal public good that every young person is entitled to access rather than a private inheritance that some young people are born into? And this is really important because the answer to that question invites us, in partnership with young people, to redesign systems so that connection, belonging, social capital, opportunity, and well-being, because we haven't talked about youth mental health enough in this conversation. That's another critical barrier to accessing opportunity. Being able to be in meaningful relationship with a mentor is intentionally not only baked into accessing mentors, but also the access to opportunity rather than accidentally inherited. It is incumbent upon us to bake this into the pathways, programs, systems, structures, and narratives we co-design in partnership with our young people. Thank you.
No, that was beautiful, Monique. And I think one of the things at Sewa that we do is called Design to Lead, where it's part of our LEAD program. And we ensure that young people, particularly high school students, they have the opportunity to identify a problem statement within their community or within their school systems and something else. And then they actually work together to build on a solution and also implement that solution. That's where we come and try to help them at the implementation part and everything. While that's at that particular scale, we would definitely want to see that at a much larger level, at a system scale that you were mentioning just now. So, Mamadou, building on that, I mean, I understand democratizing access for young people, and while that is about opportunity access once they have a credential, what about young people who leave school without a degree or a credential? And what kind of pathways can help them reconnect with education or workforce, so that they have a meaningful economic outcome at the end of the day?
Sure. Thanks for that question. I really like the way it's formulated because I think, it sort of, there's a built-in connection between education and employment, which I think is really important. And I also appreciate Monique's comments earlier, and it really, to me, it really brings it down to like culture and the importance of culture in everything we do in our work with young people. And by culture, I mean primarily the sort of the beliefs and the mindsets of the adults in the room, not just adults in schools, but adults that, in all the systems that serve young people. And those beliefs really, to me, ultimately shape the outcomes that young people are able to achieve at the end of the day. So in terms of the pathways, that help reconnect the young people who have left school without a credential, I would say that I've had the opportunity and the privilege to work with Monique and her team at Aspen for a long time to design and implement and scale what we call back on track pathways. And back on track pathways is specifically designed for young people who, some of them are in school but are struggling to graduate. Others have left completely school, and to re-engage them effectively and put them on a path to meaningful employment. So Back on Track is a framework with features and elements such as, for example, creating a post-secondary employer partnerships, making sure that schools, and community organizations have a culture of post-secondary access and completion, meaning that, from day one, young people know and are in full agreement that, getting a high school diploma or a high school equivalency is just the first step, right? You come in, you get a high school diploma, you get a high school equivalency, and that's a step towards transitioning to post-secondary education and employment. So that to me is really important. And beyond that, having the right supports. I talked earlier about what we call wraparound supports, right? So having supports, both in terms of, sort of real life supports, meaning, housing, transportation, and social emotional supports and academic supports as well, for young people to realize their career aspirations. I think that combination, is really powerful. And we've had, and I'm very happy to report that we've had like even an evaluation of the Back on Track framework by the Urban Institute, and we've had amazing outcomes, including, for example, that students who participated in Back on Track are enrolled in post-secondary education 3 times more than the comparison group. We also learned that over 7 times as many students who participated in Back on Track programs entered and completed post-secondary education. So if I were to boil it down, I would say that these pathways that help reconnect young people to education and move meaningfully towards employment have the following in common. I think that they're flexible. They combine re-engagement and skill building and paid work experience and ongoing support, right? And I can't emphasize enough the supports, right? I've had the opportunity to work with a practitioner who told me that, it's not a matter of if, but it's a matter of when they will fall, right? That the students will fall. Our role is to catch them when they fall, right? So having that as a kind of a way to reassure young people that they're free to experiment, just like any other young person, right? And sometimes they'll succeed and sometimes they'll fail. So having that type of mindset, I think, is really important in programs that are effective. So I'll go through just quickly some of the some of the promising model designs. I think pretty much everybody here has mentioned this. I think career-connected learning is important. Again, a combination of high school diploma or high school equivalency plus career preparation is important. As part of that, you help young people develop workplace readiness. You help them explore careers, right? Because for the most part, young people are not aware of the types of careers that are available to them, right? And intentionally connecting the work that they're doing in school to employment is important. The second one is having some kind of a bridge program, right? And a bridge program, for example, can be a program where a young person is in a high school, right? At the same time in a college setting, right? Where they have the chance to experience college while in high school. Sometimes they are in dual enrollment courses where they're taking classes that counts towards college while they're in high school, right? So we've seen those really make a difference in terms of, just helping young people believe that they are college material, so to speak, right? Short-term occupational trainings also are important, right? There are what we call industry recognized certifications. So these are like first level certifications that help young people quickly get into employment, right? Healthcare, for example, is known for these kinds of short-term credentials. IT is another one, right? Where young people can, over just a few months, earn a credential that they can use to get a job, right? To enter quickly in the labor market. Pre-apprenticeships and apprenticeships. So pre-apprenticeship, for example, can build foundational skills confidence and awareness and of career options before young people enter paid apprenticeships, right? Again, pre-apprenticeships serve as kind of a bridge towards an apprenticeship program. Work-based learning is another one. And I say, work-based learning in general, meaning that programs that combine work and learning, also known as earn and learn potentials, where young people are paid, to work. And at the same time, the work that they're doing is directly related to what they are learning in the classroom. This helps them build networks, build social capital, and gain the professional confidence while earning an income. Working with employers after young people transition from high school is important, right? Effective programs continue beyond placement to help young people retain their jobs, address workplace challenges, and increase their earnings. And finally, broadly, what we call dual track pathways, where this sort of distinction that we make between education and employment. I think increasingly we're seeing the lines blurred, right? Where these things are combined, right? And I think as much as we can do that for young people, I think that will really make a difference in how the transition or the connection between education between high school and the workplace is as seamless as possible. So, but again, I just going back to what I said earlier. I think culture, is really what undergirds all of this, right? The beliefs and of the people who are working with young people, and those beliefs translated into practices and mindsets, I think ultimately is what makes a difference.
No, thank you so much, Mamadou. That was very insightful. And Alfonso, the next question is for you. So we see that the composition of workforce is continuing to change, and young people are coming into employment at a time when things are moving much faster than I think even how education systems can adapt. So, what is the one thing that we should be doing today to make sure that they're prepared for the jobs of today and tomorrow?
No, thank you for that question. I'm loving this conversation. If I had to narrow it down to one thing, I would say we have to start earlier and be more intentional about connecting young people to real career pathways. We cannot wait until their senior year and ask a student to make a decision about their future when nobody has ever shown them what options they have. And so I've learned that our young people don't lack ambition. What they lacked is often access, exposure, and someone willing to help them connect the dots. And so at Urban Alliance, we focus on three things: exposure, education, and experience. Exposure helps young people see what's possible. Education helps them develop the skills to pursue it. And experience gives them the opportunity to apply those skills in a real workplace with real mentorship. And most importantly, to Dr. Monique's earlier point, real equitable pay. Because telling a young person that healthcare is a growing industry means very little if they've never met a healthcare professional, stepped inside of a hospital, or learned how to enter a career field, for just an example. And we see there are going to be significant opportunities for young people to enter into the workforce because the Bureau of Labor Statistics projects approximately, for just healthcare jobs alone here in the United States, 1.9 million job openings nationwide annually from now through 2034. And here in Michigan, where I am, the professional skills trades are opening up with approximately 518,000 jobs by 2032. And so the question that we are having is not what jobs are coming, because we know those jobs are coming, but how are we preparing our young people to fill those jobs? And in Detroit, we're trying a citywide approach on reaching young people earlier through multiple entities, through our regional chamber, looking at how do you start career exploration as early as elementary school and in middle school, and how do you provide the education and exposure to our high school students earlier on. And at Urban Alliance, we're thinking through this critically, and one of the ways we're doing this is looking at, again, that growing industry of healthcare and skills trades, and starting with our juniors earlier and getting them earn credential and getting them some essential skills, and then getting them that paid internship to pre-apprenticeship. And that's how we're moving from telling young people to dream big to actually giving them a pathway forward. I think we also have to make sure that they understand the different career pathways that they can take, whether it's stacking credentials to Mamadou's standpoint earlier, or whether that is going into a pre-apprenticeship program, going straight into an apprenticeship program post-high school, or going off to post-secondary training as a skilled trade school or college, right? Um, we also have to be honest about the disparities. If we're being real, we know based off of the numbers that the unemployment rate for young people as July 2026 between the ages of 16 to 24 was 9.1%, but for young people of color, it was about 14%, right? And so even as industries grow, opportunity is not reaching everyone equally. And with artificial intelligence, automation, and technology continuing to reshape the workforce, we can't afford to prepare young people only for the jobs that exist today. We have to give them the adaptability, digital skills, and confidence to navigate what's coming next. That means schools, employers, community organizations, and funders have to start working together. Employers have to open their doors. Schools have to connect learning to careers. Funders have to invest in wages, transportation, childcare, mentorship, and support that makes participation in workforce development or job readiness programs possible. Because talent has never been the issue for our young people. The issue is whether we are willing to build pathways that allow that talent to thrive. And if we're serious about the future of work, we can't just tell young people opportunity exists. We have to build a bridge that they can actually cross to get there.
No, that's amazing. And that reminded me, we have a after school program that, I mean, we have an after school program that runs across the country, but one of our chapters recently started a new initiative where they incentivize young people to come to after school programs just so that they can build the skill set there. Because otherwise, these are kids who need to work after school. And if there is an opportunity for them to earn while they can learn, that also builds the skill beyond whatever can be taught in the classroom. So, but there is a lot more to do, definitely. Even, I think the next question's for you. While getting connected is the first step, and we all agree that broadband equity is an important step in that process, what do you think comes next to ensure that all the young people, I know that some of our co-panelists have mentioned this previously, can actually use this technology in an equitable manner, and they access, and they can access education and career opportunities in that manner?
Yeah, well, thanks. As I said before, right, like everybody's highlighting that these problems are multifaceted, and there's a lot of really important systems that need to be built into the total wraparound solution for young folks. And I really want to emphasize, this is about access to opportunities. Young people have the drive, and often they have the skills. The question is, can they actually take what they've got and get it usefully engaged with getting more education or getting into a career pathway? And the digital connectivity of today, I mean, a lot of folks, I mean, particularly Monique and Alfonso, both just recently used kind of transportation examples, right? This is the digital connectivity and skills, the ability to use it is very similar to transportation networks. They are effectively the transportation networks. If you don't have the ability to get online to apply for that job, it's no different from 30 years ago not being able to physically get there and hand somebody your resume. This is the way it works. And so when we talk about getting folks online and getting them connected, yeah, that's the first step. You have to actually have a road to somebody's house, and you got to have a fiber optic connection or another connection to that house. What comes next is the conversion system, where we convert that connection into capability, and then that capability into credentials, and then the credentials into careers. And there's a couple of different ways to think about it. But first you get your affordable, dependable access. Then you got to make sure you've got really practical digital skills and digital fluency, right? Can you navigate these platforms? People talk about, I don't remember who it was who brought it up earlier, right? But everybody assumes that young people have all these digital skills because they're so online. But there was actually only a really narrow window. I feel fortunate to have been a part of that generation where the full suite of digital skills, learning how to use a desktop computer, learning how to use productivity software, Office Suite, Excel. That stuff kind of happened naturally for a set of folks because that was the way technology worked at that moment. A ton of kids who are very on their phones today have never opened up a Word document. They don't know what a PDF is. Yeah. They're really good. They can help you if you mispost something on Instagram, but that doesn't solve their ability to actually, respond to their boss sending them a track changes document in Word. That's just not something they ever learned how to do. So you gotta make sure they've got those skills. And that really, really, really is going to require trusted human in-community navigators who can get folks from, okay, we've solved this infrastructure problem. I'm not claiming that's entirely solved. It's not at all. And the failure to solve that is a choice. And I could talk about that all day. But moving past that first question, now the question is, who in this person's community, their physical community, their religious community, their ethnic community, their extended family, who can they find who can be somebody who can navigate them through these challenges, make sure they can identify what skills they need, and they can get connected to the pathways that are available to them. Somebody's got to know about that. And then there's got to be accountability for those outcomes, right? We can't measure success like, oh, how many Chromebooks did we put in kids' backpacks? That didn't do anything. How many kids did we send an email address or did we send a link to some training program to? That doesn't get the job done, even if the kids clicked on it. The question is, measure it. We got to start measuring it. When I was doing economic development for the Commonwealth of Virginia, I was focused on low income and often rural communities. And what we would look at is credential attainment. How many kids have something they can take away from their engagement with these programs that actually help them get a job later? And then we would look at engagement into a pathway that doesn't just get a kid a gig, but gets a kid a career that they can actually move up in. And, I think what's going to really be important is recognizing that technology can and should widen young people's options, but we can't leave that person alone to navigate that increased breadth of opportunity. We have to have in-community actors who have been resourced to go support that kid in navigating through these many, many, many more options that they're going to have now to get them onto an effective track. And if they're on the wrong track, help them find the right one.
No, that's amazing. I'm learning a lot, and this is a very interesting and insightful conversation. So, just a couple of open-ended questions. For example, this is also weirdly a time when many employers, there are half the employers who say credentials matter less and skills matter more. But at the same time, we know that credentials matter in some pathways. So, are we becoming better at reconnecting young people to credentials at the moment when employers say that these should matter less than skills? So when does working towards a credential become a pathway, and when can, if there is a possibility, can it become a detour?
I mean, the first thing I would say is it's absolutely true that credentials are not intrinsically valuable, right? Like a credential is a signal. And in a perfect world, we'd be able to translate kids' skills directly to what employers need and get them connected. The problem is, and it's increasingly true in today's world where people are, you got AIs reading internship and job applications and school applications and all the rest of this. The credential it's a reliable substitute. It's a reliable way for somebody to create a shorthand that says, I know this person has these skills. And so I do think there's risk that somebody mistakes the credential for the goal as opposed to the credential for an instrument that gets you to the goal. But until or unless we're able to build really, really, really strong skills-based pathways that sidestep the credentials, I think that there's going to have to be some role for recognizable, available credentials as folks pursue careers.
Okay. If I have an audience question that I would like to. Oh, sorry, Mamadi, you were speaking.
No, I was just going to add just quickly on the credentials question. So at JFF, we've done a lot of work on promoting skills-based hiring, and especially with employers, to help them move beyond these degree requirements and pedigree requirements, frankly, and by focusing on the skills people have gained through work, education, volunteering, and lived experience. And in our, like, a couple of things we've learned from that is that there's a lot of work to be done that remains to be done with employers. I think most of the time there's like a lot of lip service paid to, like, oh, we want, we want experience. We don't care about degrees. I think it's true to a certain point, but I feel like there's a lot, and it also depends on sector, right? So, but overall, I think there's just a lot of work that remains to be done. And we've seen like a lot of employees step up actually to like really lead in terms of skills base, like really by even modifying their requirements, entry level requirements. Walmart, for example, is one of those employers at the national level who's really led, I think, in that regard. But again, we're convincing employees to not just recognize overlooked talent and to improve diversity and retention and create clearer pathways from skills to employment and career advancement. I think we've got a long way to go, right? We've got a long way to go with employees. We also have a long way to go in terms of even the way that these skills are measured, the way that they are documented, and the sort of the level of recognition especially in the employee world that exists. And again, even in that regard, I think we have a lot of work to do.
No, fair enough. And I think another question, just again an open-ended one, is that I mean, it combines an audience question plus something that I had in my mind. So, for example, with the recent rise in creator economy, I think right now it's a $250 billion economy within the US, and it's going to be, or it's estimated to be $1,300 billion or so by 2033. Now, for these young people who may not see a traditional job market as their best fit anymore, what does a real pathway into entrepreneurship or business ownership look like today? And what supports can any of us, provide them so that they can get there?
I'm happy to get us started. And I'll start, well, I love the conversation so far that's really separating like these like softer skills from technical skills. When I think about the future of work and the creative economy, I think for young people themselves, making sure that young people really understand two things feels critical to entrepreneurship. The first is just the finances of it. So much of our world is changing so fast that making sure that young people really have understanding financially of how to build businesses and how to build a business in the face of such an unpredictable economy is really, really critical to supporting pathways to entrepreneurship for young people. That feels like a critical part of it. And then the second piece is we continue to ask questions about the future of work when so much is unknown. I think to support young people in entrepreneurship, I would really make the case and argue for the ability for young people to be able to do really deep work and really deep learning on whatever area they are interested in building a business around. When we think about the future of work and we think about the impact of AI on the economy, young people who will have a viable opportunity to do meaningful work in a future that is so unknown in terms of the impact of AI need to be able to focus deeply on whatever work it is, whatever area of expertise they have landed on, and the knowledge and ability to really be able to build out a sustainable economic model around the area of entrepreneurship that they have explored. And I want to be fair to the conversation we've been having so far because I hear all of my panelists, and I really agree on the balance of technical skills and soft skills. And when I think about the future and so much that is unknown, and I am answering this question as a professional in the field, and I'm also answering this question as a mama of three. The thing that I want young people to be able to do is to be able to set their mind on whatever the area of expertise they have landed on and to be able to not only work deeply in that area, but have the knowledge, skills, and capacity to sustain themselves in the area that they've chosen, especially given how much we don't know about the future of work. I think about even in the last 5 years, how much has changed and shifted, and how we even I remember, I'd say probably 5 years ago, making the case for law school, and now finding that with AI, even by the third year of law schools, those first and second year law degrees are no longer even viable in our current economy. So, with so much changing in the skills and trade world, I would say preparing young people is in part the knowledge and skills, that sort of soft skills piece that Alfonso was speaking to earlier around what young people need. And I would also make the case of young people being able to financially sustain themselves and be able to have deep, deep, deep knowledge on the kinds of skills and industries that we know are going to be critical to the future, that are never going to go away.
And I think to Dr. Malik's point as well is ensuring those young people who want to go into entrepreneurship have that firsthand experience, right? A lot of times we hear them say, "I want to do this." And I was like, "Well, where have you ever like shadowed anybody, or have you ever interned at a small business to see what actually goes on behind the scenes?" And we've learned that a lot of times when we give young people those experiences, they either love it or they change their mind really quick. Oh, I don't think I want to be an entrepreneur. I didn't realize that I might not get a paycheck that first couple months because I'm trying to navigate all of these different things. And so a lot of those components is just really creating real world experiences so young people understand what they're getting themselves into. But then I also think we can also connect young people to resources that are in our community that can support entrepreneurs. I know for us, we have the 10,000 Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Initiative that we try to connect young people to get that earned lived experience working with other professionals and entrepreneurs within the city.
Yeah, and I was gonna so ditto to what everybody said, and I really plus one to what Alfonso just said about sort of typically the disconnect between young people's perception of entrepreneurship and the reality of entrepreneurship. Like young people tend to be drawn to entrepreneurship because there's a lot of freedom and whatever, but not knowing the reality of like owning your business, right? Um, you know, I do think though, like and Monique's Dr. Miles' work here on sort of creative youth development pathways is really inspiring to me because you know we we and my organization included like really tend to push young people towards in demand careers, right? Like IT and healthcare and all that stuff, you know, and even there, like the labor market changes so fast that it's hard to keep up with what's in demand. But I feel like that we as a field also really need to pay attention to what young people are passionate about, right? And I think through Monique and her work at Aspen, sort of the arts, for example, to me, it really represent a sector in which like a lot of young people are passionate about the arts, right? And young people want to work in the arts, but we don't always, you know, we were not always intentional in like creating pathways in the arts that lead to sustainable employment, right? And there are, like we're learning in that work that there are a lot of pathways in the arts or in whatever young people are passionate about, right? So I'm like, all right, why can't we help young people, whoever they are, wherever they are, whatever sector or whatever thing they are passionate about, like turn that into careers, right? I think to me, we should do that as a field. But going back to the question about entrepreneurship, I think again that like helping young people identify, their interests again and the potential of turning those interests into entrepreneurship, distinguishing between business, like intentional business building from like gig work. I mean, gig work is important, right? I think gig work can also be instructive. You can learn a lot about gig work in terms of entrepreneurship. I think that when you're talking about entrepreneurship, intentionally connecting young people to capital and technology and mentors, I think is extremely important. Helping them, like really getting a little bit sophisticated, like in terms of tracking business formation, like how do you, how do you develop a pitch, right? How do you find mentors? And again, not different from everything that we've said so far overall in terms of the pathways, but I feel like in terms of entrepreneurship, those are things that are really, really important. Mentorship in particular is really important, right? So yes, entrepreneurship remains untapped in my experience, but we're learning increasingly, like through Monique's work and others, that there are really these represent there are opportunities that can lead to meaningful employment and meaningful success for young people through the entrepreneurship route.
Yeah, and just
No,
to build on that a little bit, I think that really good points have been made here, right? And you got to look upstream of where we're focused now. I mean, Monique was making the point about, if you're shooting for a target of technical skills you need today, right? Like that may not be the right target 2, 3 years from now. And think back 5, 6 years when everybody was saying, oh, every kid in the world needs to learn how to code. And it's like, well, where we sit here today, it's like, well, AI is going to do most of that work, right? And there's a lot of people who got those credentials and training that are now regretting it. I think you go upstream. You think about how can we replicate the mentorship and access to capital and ability to enter career pathways systems that already exist for the privileged few and create versions of those that are accessible on the basis of drive, talent, and desire, right? On the part of our young people who would love to have access to those kind of opportunities and don't have them today. We could be building those in intentional ways. And there's a lot of work that's going on, both by the organizations that folks on this panel are a part of and others that are starting to replicate pieces of that. But, I think one of the things that's really important is for young people to understand that entrepreneurship, that has to come at the end of having a really clear understanding of what problem your business is going to solve and what demand it's going to meet for that business to make sense. I think a lot of young folks see this idea of, well, I'm going to run my own thing, and they think about what they'd like to be doing, not where are their customers, where's their demand, and what opportunity have I identified to do that. And if we could connect them to these right kind of networks, they can gain that insight. And by the way, gain access to capital to get their business off the ground that they don't currently have today.
no, that's amazing. Uh, okay. I'm thinking through all the pointers myself. So moving on to some of the last, questions for the day. I think Dr. Monique, looking ahead, I mean, I think you've kind of answered this question a little, but let me see. What would a stronger youth opportunity system look like? One that helps more young people successfully navigate education, work, and life. And if you feel like already given your thoughts on it, I think just an alternative is that has the field, we are trying to reconnect or connect young people to institutions. And is there a question about should the institutions also be working towards something where they try to reconnect to young people? Because at the end of the day, they are, going to be the citizens of tomorrow, or they're the citizens of today too, but they'll be the employees and employers of tomorrow.
Yeah, I love that last framing that you offered up because that's really where I would start or begin my answer to this question. To the conversation we've all been having here today, I think really what we're talking about is transforming from, young people having minimal access to the idea that not just social capital and career opportunities, young people having access to them, but universal access and the idea that these are public goods that are baked into the pathways, opportunities, structures, systems, and narratives that all young people must be supported to navigate. And what I would add to that is that, and I love this because I feel like other panelists have spoken so beautifully to this. Alfonso continues to talk about the talent that all young people have and really the accessibility being a barrier. And so, as we think about what access to universal pathways that connect every young person should look like, continuing to think about how we are preparing trusted adults, trusted mentors, how we are organizing paid work experiences, career networks, And also, and again, we've been talking about this throughout our conversation today, really meaningful and transformative opportunities for young people to exercise leadership. We haven't really gotten into this conversation, but what we found in our work is that for young people, particularly opportunity youth who've been out of work and who have been out of school and out of work, the civic engagement and civic pathways are also integral to how young people meaningfully reconnect. And so, what we hear from young people is reconnecting to school, getting into a meaningful viable economic pathway means that they now are bringing their cousin on the journey, bringing their best friend on the journey, sometimes bringing their parents on the journey. Certainly a two-gen approach for young people who are parents, meaning that they are also bringing their children on this journey. And what it means for them to meaningfully reconnect their peers, their family, and their communities includes, again, not just access to social and economic mobility, but also civic engagement. Young people really expressing agency, a deep sense of agency about the kind of communities that they want to be a part of and want to inhabit and want their peers, families, and communities to inhabit. So I would say, answering this question, that it is universally how we transition the idea of social and economic capital into a universal public good. And our work really is to build the infrastructure that makes it possible for young people to be able to do this in a transformative way. The question we often hold in our work is, how do we build communities where every young person is connected to opportunity before they ever become disconnected? And the answer to that question in our work network is both intervention and prevention. We are working all the time to disrupt this connection and to get young people meaningfully connected as quickly as possible onto a path of social and economic opportunity. And that shifts the responsibility from individual young people to systems and communities that surround young people, knowing that really the work of those systems and those communities is to create much stronger pathways to opportunities for the current generation and for future generations. That's how I would answer this question.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Monique. And moving on to Mamadou, like for your concluding remarks, what skills? I mean, I think we've spoken a little about it, but skills both from a technical standpoint and other standpoint, do you think will keep coming up the most, regardless of how technology changes, for young people to build as the nature of work continues to change?
Yes, thanks for that question. So I think it's hard to sort of boil it down to specific skills because as we talked about, just the skills composition is constantly evolving. Evan talked earlier about coding, which again, like just a few years ago was the thing to do, to make money, and that's obsolete now. So I think we have to really think about perhaps in the skills that will endure no matter what. And we there's these skills are referred to sometimes as soft skills or durable skills or power skills or success skills, right? The ability to communicate effectively, to collaborate, to solve problems, to work in teams, I feel like those, no matter what happens in the job market, will continue to be needed in the workplace. And I think that it's really important um, not to assume that young people, especially the population of young people that I work with, that my work is focused on, do not have those skills, right? A lot of the young people from low-income backgrounds and young people's facing systemic barriers, have social networks. They have social capital, right? They are resilient and talented, right? So I think it's really important for us to not to like not assume that they don't have those skills and work with them to translate whatever their experience is from, to translate that experience into skills that they can use in the workplace. I think technology literacy writ large is important, right? Because I mean, we're in a world where technology is going to continue to dominate the way we work, right? There's nothing we can't do anything about that, and I think that's a good thing, right, for the most part. Um, so really helping young people be able to leverage technology and work alongside technology, like use technology to be more productive, more efficient, I think is also important. And the last thing I'll say is, you know, there's something really important about um, kind of, you know, being in the workplace, right? I think like being in the workplace, especially in this day and age, can help young people learn about conflict resolution, working with other people, dealing with adversity, um, working in teams, right? Working in a group to solve hard problems. Like, yeah, I feel like the workplace is just can be a really powerful experience for young people. And as much as possible, connecting that workplace to what young people are doing in the classroom. I think the more we can do that, the better. There are places, there are schools, and I'm sure Alfonso's work is in that, does that very well. Like really connect the what happens in the classroom to what happens in the workplace, or even programs that make the workplace the classroom, right? So I think the more we can do to bridge that gap, the better. Again, to help young people be in situations where they're learning and cultivating and building, all these skills that I named earlier, I think is going to be important.
Thank you so much, Mamadou. Alfonso, what do you think? Like looking ahead, what do you hope employers will do differently to ensure that there are stronger entry points for young talent? And I don't know, how can we advocate for that, I guess, with employers?
That's a great question. I think making sure that, again, that paid, meaningful work experiences are accessible to young people, regardless of their zip code, family income, or personal connections, is important. And as employers are navigating that, ensuring that we have strong entry level points that aren't just, the refer somebody programs, right? A lot of employers will have that for opportunities, but also looking at employers doing the outreach and going to community organizations and working alongside organizations like an Urban Alliance to really build what it looks like. We say that we speak young people, but we also speak to our employers as well. And how do we bridge that gap in making sure that they understand that the young person that you inherit is there because they deserve to be there. They have the talent that is necessary. Understanding that that paid work experience is, again, an opportunity for young people to see what's possible, to support their families, but also really working with employers to understand that our young people have so much to offer, right? So much to offer as it comes into talent. I mean, the these young people that I get to encounter on a day-to-day basis wow me every chance I encounter them on understanding how they're navigating the workplace, what their future holds for them, and how they even help navigate systems change when it comes to diversity and age, right? And working with younger managers and helping those managers become secure. And so I encourage employers to look at really giving young people opportunities as an opportunity to really help change the whole culture of the company, right? Because young people have so much to offer and add in that space, whether it's unique ideas, whether it is really challenging how things have formerly run. I typically am always challenged on my management style when it comes to working with younger people. It has me being adaptable to different styles of management. And I think our young people, our employers can really learn a lot from our young people within the space and time. And so I just think giving them the opportunity, ensuring that you're not ignoring them just because they don't have the experience already, because many of them may have it in transferable ways. But then also understanding that those young people may need additional wraparound supports when they come into your place of employment, like having those transportation barriers or childcare barriers, and being empathetic with those barriers and walking with them and teaching them how to overcome those barriers in ways I think is really important as well.
Thank you, Alfonso. Finally, even these will be, the final concluding remarks. As you can see, I mean, I think there is no doubt that digital access is one of the most essential parts, what do you say, parts of life. Like in our thing, we used to say something called roti kapda makan, which meant that you need food, a house, and clothes for survival. But at this point, I think digital access is also as important as the rest of those three. Now, when that's the case, in a truly, I think, egalitarian world or an idealistic world, what do you think true digital opportunity for every young person would look like?
Yeah, thank you for that. And it's a privilege to speak last. I want to say that I don't think at all that the digital opportunity is at all going to be sufficient to solve these problems. The things that the rest of the panel have been talking about are necessary as well. But um, fundamentally, social and economic activity has moved, and it has moved to the digital space. And there is not a way that young people can be meaningfully engaged with our economy and with our society if they do not have the ability to get reliably, affordably online, and they don't have the skills and they don't have the devices that they need to make that happen. And we are the most powerful, most well-resourced nation that has ever existed. There is no reason every single American young person does not have those today, other than a choice and a lack of political and social will to solve that problem. The resources exist, the frameworks exist, the community organizations exist. And so, what needs to happen is more people need to stand up and demand that we engage the kind of programming that I and the rest of the panel have been talking about today. There's absolutely no reason. I referenced it at the beginning and I'll reference it at the end because it should be a scandal. There are $22 billion sitting in the Treasury in the account of the program that I used to run before the current presidential administration. And that money, Congress passed a law and the president of the United States signed it. That money is supposed to go to solve this problem for disconnected young folks, among other folks, seniors, it's people with disabilities, etc. But the first and most important thing that has to happen is that young people, their parents, their friends, their advocates need to stand up and say, these solutions exist. I'm going to do my best, and I expect and demand society to meet me halfway and to implement these solutions that we've been talking about. Nobody needs to write more blueprints. People need to start building the stuff the blueprints drew up. And that's where we are today. And I think fundamentally, the solutions exist. We know how to implement them. We got to get together. We got to get the will to make it happen.
No, that's amazing. Thank you for a strong closing for us. And on that note, we will slowly move to the closing remarks. This has been a very thoughtful conversation. And I think, I mean, it was very engaging and it was a very beautiful conversation. I think Dr. Monique started us off on a very strong note, and even you ended us on a very strong note. And, both Alfonso and Mamadou had some amazing points to bring up throughout. And I think, just to summarize the conversation, if I will be able to do some justice, let me try. It's that the responsibility at the end of the day of connecting young people to opportunity, of course, does not rest with young people alone. It rests in all the institutions and communities and systems that need to build universal pathways that connect young people to education, work, mentorship, civic engagement, and social capital. And this so that there is no disconnection where, before anything happens. And the goal is also, it's not a simple goal. It's not just about connecting young people to the internet or any kind of broadband access, like Even was mentioning. But the real pathway is to convert that access at the end of the day into digital capability, and that capability into credentials, and that credentials into a sustainable career, so that they have, and with the helm of some trusted community navigators, so that we can support young people throughout the journey. And to Mamadou's point about the goal is not just about credentials for their own sake either. It's about some skill based learning and creating that clear bridge between the skills and interests at the end of the day. He also brought up a great point about how arts do not get enough recognition or as many pathways as the rest of the economic opportunities that are available outside. So at the end of the day, it's to ensure that whether the skill based skills and interests built through employment or further education or entrepreneurship, they require employers to recognize skills more effectively as well, and young people to also have that knowledge and real world experience and support needed to navigate their chosen path. I think I've also heard all the panelists mention about um, I think I'm a millennial, so I grew up with broadband access, trying to access the internet through, putting your phone number in, punching your phone number in, and the password. And right now, where Wi-Fi just gets connected automatically. So coming from that generation, um, I think I was grateful to be using Microsoft Word doc from a young age or something else, because that was the only thing. So there were less distractions. There was no great social media until I came to high school or later. So all I had to do was, play Minesweep and things like that on the computer at the max. So, but now when there are so many other tools that are available, and obviously Word doc is not the most attractive tool for young people, there also has to be a need, like a deliberate uh, skills development or training given by the employers and also by other community organizations which engage with these young people towards a career focused opportunity to teach them about how do they work on tracking a document in case, or as simple, like they might seem like simple skills, but these are the ones that make sure that they are career ready for everyday work. And the goal should also include something about intervention and prevention. Communities must reconnect young people who have already become disconnected due to unwarranted, um, like events in their lives, while also building systems to ensure that every young person is connected to the opportunity. And the responsibility at the end of the day, I think the onus is on all of us, and the focus is not just about teaching them the skills that they lack, but also recognizing that the skills that they already possess and translating those experience into workforce language in a way that it gives them opportunities, and in also a way that employers understand that the skills are changing over time. And your employee demographic, I don't think we've hit on that part in this particular conversation, but the employee demographic is constantly changing, obviously. So we can't keep using the same strategies or ideas that were used in the past with the current generation. Every generation comes with their own set of skills and set of interests. So this has been a very engaging conversation for me, and I hope it has been the same for you. I genuinely appreciate all of you joining on a Saturday afternoon, and I'd like to sincerely thank each one of our panelists for sharing their experiences and perspectives and practical insights with us today. Thank you for being so generous with your time and for making this very engaging. I'd also like to thank Nikhil Jainji, who is our Vice President, for joining us today and for opening this conversation with his remarks. And the one thing is, please join us for the sessions tomorrow if you have some time. We have a couple more conversations going on about nonprofit management in the age of AI and about medical volunteerism. And we at Sewa, we always look forward to build long-term partnerships with all of our experts, their organizations, and other collaborators towards meaningful conversations around policy and action. So please keep us in your mind and email me at any time. I'll also share my phone number on like email after the event, and we will make sure that the key takeaways from this particular event will go into a detailed report, and they'll be disseminated to a wider audience. So as part of that, we will reach out to you to confirm quotes and other details before we share anything publicly. So anything else, if anyone else has anything for me, please let me know. But thank you once again, everyone, for being a part of this conversation. We hope this was engaging, and please scan this particular code. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to speaking with